welcome everyone to our panel webinar today called Mastering the Marketer's Data Journey. So I'm Sam Melnick. I'm the Vice President of Market Insights and Growth over at Allocadia. So before I introduce our esteemed panelists, I do want to give you a little background information here. So you log in, you see this title, you might be saying to yourself, Marketer's Data Journey, what does that actually mean? Or maybe you're hearkening back to old Brady Bunch episodes and thinking, data, 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 why does everything have to be about data? Well, first of all, I think you should be thinking about this data journey, and we'll talk more about it in a bit. And it's for good reason that data keeps coming up. So a little background on me. Prior to being at Allocadia and in this role, I actually ran Allocadia's marketing team. And then even before that, I've worked at multiple marketing technology companies. And then even before that, I was a former CMO and marketing operations analyst at IDC. So what does that mean is I've had hundreds of conversations with marketers over the last decade, and there's no doubt about it that data is the currency that drives organizations and businesses forward. And for marketers, this is what separates the best marketing organizations from the rest. The question that always comes up, though, is why are we using data? What's the best way to harness it? And how do we help our marketers across the world or our organizations utilize it to make better decisions? So with this in mind, we at Allocadia actually went out and interviewed a dozen or so marketing operations, analytics, and technology professionals around their own data journey. We wrote a research paper, which was published just last Tuesday, and you'll be getting a copy of it as well. And we're now hosting 3 of those 12 folks that we interviewed for this webinar. And really what we're going to do today is dig in on how to approach this data exercise, where these folks focus, and some key learnings that they can pass along to you to take on your own data journey, and really make the best use of this really strategic asset. Again, data. So quickly, I'll introduce the 3 panelists, then I'll hand it over to them and start answering questions. So first of all, we have Lori West, who is the Vice President of Marketing, Technology and Operations over at Genpact, formerly of CSC and BT. We have Justin Sheriff, who is the Director of Marketing, Technology and Operations over at LogMeIn, who is formerly from Vistaprint. He's held multiple roles around technology and analytics over the years. And then finally, Teresa Joy, who's the Vice President of Marketing Operations and Technology over at Autodesk, who's formerly at Dell, who is in a data science, customer insights role previously. So less about me talking, more about the panelists answering questions. So let's start with a really broad question. If you could just state your name, your title again, so we know who's talking, and then share with the audience your opinion on why data must be prioritized within the marketing organization. So kind of a softball to start us off. Teresa, do you think you can kick us off here?
Absolutely, Sam. So Teresa Joy, VP of Marketing Ops and Technology at Autodesk. I've been a data geek and a nerd for a very long time. You mentioned it up front. I used to be in the world of data before taking on the broader operations and technology work stream. One thing I would always say about data, just like everything, right? When you start thinking about marketing, it's actually moving more from an art to a science. And when it moves to science, you actually start getting the importance of data, right? It becomes more of a scientific approach, and data becomes your new currency, as you said, right? So looking at data is critical for a couple of reasons. Actually more so today for our CMOs when I look at them. So think about all the investments we make. Think about all the execution vehicles we have. Marketing probably among all functions has the majority of execution vehicles and investment dollars spent across most of those execution vehicles. In addition, think about all the technology elements we have. We have about 7,000 plus technology elements, and each technology brings with it the nuances of data, right? At that point, to make any optimized decision or any informed decision, you really have to understand the data, the impact of the data, and then just understanding what's noise versus what's relevant. So from that perspective, data is definitely the new currency from a marketing point of view.
Awesome, thanks, Teresa. Justin, why don't you take the next answer?
Thanks, Sam. I'm really excited to be here. I'm Justin Sheriff, Director of Marketing Technology and Operations at LogMeIn. I completely agree with Teresa that data is the new currency. It's the lifeblood, of an organization. So today's marketers, they're leveraging data or should be leveraging data if they're not in every aspect of their job. To me, data isn't just about, what's in rows and columns of a spreadsheet or what's in a performance dashboard, but it also means kind of all the observations, reactions that you have and that your customer has and your fellow employees have. So data is everything around us, and organizations can't go on without data. I'd say it's probably the second biggest or second most important aspect of an organization besides the people. So data is everywhere, and if you don't have good data and you don't have good people, that's a bad combination.
Great. And Lori, why don't you take us home on this one?
Yeah, sure thing. Lori West, I'm the Vice President of Marketing, Operations, and Technology with Genpact. I cannot agree more with what I've heard already. That data is absolutely the new currency. If you think about directionally where we are 10 years ago, it was kind of a linear path to the customer's journey. Now with digital coming in, it is absolutely more layered, it's more complex. There are so many data elements, so much information available to a customer, which then leads to data for us to analyze. And it is incumbent upon us to be able to really weed through all of the noise, find what's relevant, and more importantly, find what we can take action on. To me, that's the fundamental layer. And if you think about with all of the tools and technologies that we have in our hands today, we should be able to go in with a high degree of accuracy to identify the right targets, to craft the right message, deliver it at the right time in the right channel, and then be able to precisely track the triggers to conversion and how a lead will move through the funnel, and then be able to answer the questions: what channels, what tactics, what campaigns are the most successful, what is driving the most revenue, what is going to take us forward as marketers to the next level.
That's great. So I mean, I think a couple of things that I really like that you see me looking down, I'm writing down stuff, but I think first of all, there's an acknowledgement that, data is really important, but there's other things that might be as, if not more important, namely customers and then the people within the organization. Because when I think about the data, and what I heard from all three of you is that data is great, but ultimately you have to activate it or use it in market. And when we talk about this data journey, that came up probably with each one of you and certainly during the interviews. So like to get there, particularly at these large organizations that you've all been part of, I think each one of you are definitely $1 billion plus organizations, been at organizations that are well more than $1 billion plus as well. Like it doesn't just magically appear, this data, and you don't magically use it. So like Teresa, like when you've implemented, let's call it a data strategy at a company, where do you actually get started and like why do you start there?
So I think, Sam, this goes back to the roots of marketing, right? Marketing as a function thinks about customer first, right? It's all about customers. So when we start our data journey, and having done this once before in my previous role at Dell and then setting this practice up at Autodesk, one of the things that I've realized is, with the amount, as Laurie mentioned, the wealth of data, the proliferation of data, when you think about a data strategy, it's firstly, I think the first step every marketing ops or a marketing analytics leader needs to take is understand what the customer needs are when it comes to data, right? What is it that we're trying to solve with data? Once you understand that, so it could be as simple as a KPI, it could be as complicated as I want to do a media mix model and I want to know where I'm investing. So it could be any of those things, but understanding the outcome with the data that you're trying to get to actually then gets you to the place where you actually understand what are the data that you need to build that outcome, right? Once you understand that, then you look at the sources, then from the sources you actually understand what's in scope versus what's not in scope, what's probably noise and I could live without. And then you move into stages like, hey, how do I procure this data? How do I store this data? What's my governance model across this data set? Because you want to keep, with the data proliferation, data hygiene is a big problem, right? Just keeping it constantly up to speed. And then last but not the least is the systems by which you will make sure your data is put together in front of your customers in the most informed way, right? So when I think about data strategy and when I think about my team implementing that, it's really going through those processes. And I tell people, right, it's not rocket science, but it's definitely science. And it's how you get to it is the process around and the muscle that you build around the entire process.
And that's great. And I like kind of walking through the steps that, the data journey research that we did. We definitely have like a framework, and coming from that like analyst background, ask the marketing team that I used to run, like frameworks are like my second nature. So I love that kind of how you walk through it. Lori, how about you? Like where do you start and why?
Yeah, so similar to what Teresa's just said, we start with understanding what the end goal is. So what are the questions that we're trying to answer with the data strategy? And we build backwards from there. So, our most recent data journey that we've been on, we looked at things, there was so much new technology, so many new channels and tactics coming into our marketing mix that we knew we needed to adapt. Just based off of that, we needed to build all new campaign hierarchies. We needed all new frameworks. We knew we needed to build the foundational infrastructure layer in order to drive to an end goal. And I think that, to me, was always the most critical piece, is sitting down to understand, what are you trying to answer at the end of the day, building the strategy and understanding the foundation layer. I mean, I think about our data journey in Genpact, and we spent a full year building the foundation layer, just the infrastructure. When we started all the way back at contact data and building an MDM strategy, and pulling in tools to validate the data at the point of entry, all the way through the campaign hierarchy, all of the field mapping, everything that went through, so that when it came down to our data visualization tool and we look at performance measurement, we had the right level of consistency in the build to drive to the result that we were looking for. So it took a long time just to get that piece really just nailed down tight.
Yeah, I mean, I actually love to just do a straw poll between the three of you. Like, when it comes to setting this data strategy, is there ever an instance where people are like understanding how long it takes, or are they always like really impatient? Like, has anybody been, I guess, has there ever been instances where people aren't impatient?
We had to do ours in bite-sized chunks, I think, because if you just wait till the very end, people are like, what are you working on? So we looked at it as, hey, what are our quick wins, and how can we do little mini releases along the way and get them out there, get folks starting to use and adopt, and then do all the inherent training. So then when you get to the next step, people are starting to understand the journey, and they're following with you and getting that training in, and the adoption then becomes that much easier, rather than waiting till the entire thing is done and saying, here's the new data, and having to then drag people along with you.
I actually agree with Lori on this, right? When we started building our data strategy, we looked at things like what's quick win, right? And in some of those cases, the quick win was more of a heavy lift for us versus what's really the long term. Because you have to understand that as the marketing pool, the pool of talent in marketing is so diverse. And you can see the generations of the staff within the marketing organization, right? So there are people who are more used to the instant gratification. I need something now. And then there are people who are more used to, okay, let's build it out. And I think as data leaders or operational leaders, we do have to break the problem into bite-sized and prove it along the way. So it's also a question of credibility and the organization learning along with you. So, I mean, at no point is the foundation journey really complete. You will keep on building it stronger, and it keeps on expanding. It's just how you show some critical wins to win the trust of the stakeholders, so they know this is critical for them. So that's I completely concur with Lori on how they were approaching it.
Yeah, and I think we're all coming from marketing organizations that are fairly large, right? And it takes Herculean efforts to roll anything out across an entire organization. So, what we try to do is partner with our analytics team, number one, because I'm on the technology team. So technology and analytics partnering together. And then we find some partners in the business who we know and we trust, who trust us. And so we'll roll things out in small pockets. And then once we get some traction, the other teams will start to see what's happening and they'll really jump along. So that's something that I think has been really helpful for us, is finding these test cases or these small, proof of concepts with a couple of people that we trust, has really helped us roll things out to the rest of the organization with success and with trust.
So I like that, and it was touching on kind of my next question, which is about how do you actually turn the strategy into something real. But like you just talked about POC, and like I'm a big advocate of whether it's a POC or trialing it. But Justin, how do you choose kind of those pockets or those POC? Is it the same ones over and over? Does it depend on the project? Like how do you go about that?
Yeah. So we have a couple of teams internally that kind of always raise their hand and say, hey, we want to be a part of this new thing that you guys are doing. So we have 3 business units, and there's one in particular that tends to always raise their hand, which has been great. But for us, it's all about starting at the beginning and figuring out what is the goal that we're trying to accomplish and which of the businesses does it apply to, or which may apply to all of them. And then we really partner with, like I said, analytics and technology together to make sure that we're embedded in the business. So at the very beginning, when we're doing our goal setting, we ensure that we have the foundation in place to be able to measure those goals at the end. And I think that's the key thing. If you have that cohesiveness between marketing and operations at the very beginning, then at the end, the data is going to be there because you would have put all the taxonomy and infrastructure and foundation in place to really be successful. And if you don't put that thought in at the beginning and you're trying to report on craziness at the end, that's never successful. So lesson learned there. I'm sure, the two of you have also had that same lesson learned many times. Got to start at the beginning.
Yeah, and like when I think about like foundation has come up a bunch already, which I really like because like I think in like the paper we talk about building a cake, but I also think about it as like a house. Like you can't build walls without that foundation, and it's also the like. And Teresa, you and I, when we kind of talked about this paper and this kind of theory behind it, it's like you might want to get started fast, which many of you have said, but like spending, call it 50% of your time up front on the model, on the strategy, on the buy-in, it'll pay you back like tenfold or whatever. Go slow to go fast kind of thing that you were saying. Teresa, I actually have a question for you. Like you're both nodding your head around the POC and the same folks. Do you ever have instances where you have to like hold groups back and be like, no, you actually aren't ready to do this, or no, you can't do this? Can you talk about that?
We do actually. And just like Justin just mentioned, we have multiple business units who are stakeholders, right? So we have our BU marketing teams, then we have our CSO marketing teams, then we also have our regional demand gen marketing teams. And it's interesting when we start to publish our thing, the appetite for doing something around data and making the right informed decisions is huge across each of these groups, right? But you have to pick and choose a battle depending on a couple of things, right? The maturity of the ask, what is the business outcome that you're looking at? The maturity of the data that's available to actually solve the problem, and then the maturity of the stakeholders who are going to utilize the data for making the informed decisions, right? So these 3 things have to come together for us to really do a proof of concept. Otherwise, it really becomes us chasing the tail, right? We're going around in circles. So typically, we've had to have the tough conversations where I've had to say, or my data leader has had to say to one of the groups, hey, we understand your need, but we're going to prioritize this POC given the maturity index that we measure a POC on, and we will get back to you. But some of the stuff that we're actually doing would help you guys also in the long run. So it's really that kind of a conversation that we have with teams. But yes, we have a ton of people who would just like to jump on the train right now and get something out, but you have to go slow to go fast.
Lori, like how do you like Teresa mentioned one way of saying no. How do you say no? But what's also the risk of like letting it go a little too wild west?
Yeah, it's funny because as Teresa was talking, so we were very deliberate in making sure that we did the releases and we prioritized, and we keep pointing people back to the prioritized release of it. We also find that the more you give this much, and then suddenly people are like, oh, data, and the desire to have more and more and more and more is always there. And we find ourselves having to ask, well, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, what is the question that you're trying to answer? Because I think when you go back to that layer, you find that oftentimes the data requests aren't necessary at all. It's, there's data and people kind of just start to get blinded by it almost. They see more is better, and more is not better. More is just more. It's more relevant is better. It's getting down to something that is actually something that you can take action on, that you can understand, that actually has context in the business, in the context of what you're trying to do. So for us, I find it more in that direction than saying, trying to push people back saying, no, no, no. It's just trying to help them understand actually that what they're asking for isn't necessarily the answer, that the answer is more in what we've already got established for them, or it's in the roadmap and it's coming an XYZ date.
Great. Yeah, I mean, for me, like I think it's an important question. I'll actually ask Justin in a second. How do you say no, or how do you redirect? Because like I almost, like as a marketer, I have like this like natural kind of reaction when I hear more and more and more. I kind of flinch because it feels like there's always more and more and more. So like Justin, how have you like at an organization like a LogMeIn, how do you redirect? How do you say no? How do you make sure people like aren't just, I mean, going off too much on their own, because it's almost inevitable.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So, in regards to technology, which oftentimes feeds the data, right, or consumes the data, depending on which side you're on, we often get requests for new and exciting integrations or new and exciting technologies. And the first question is always, what are you trying to accomplish? And then the second question for us internally on my team is, do you already have something in place that can accomplish this at 50%, 70%, 90%, or can we answer 90% of the questions with what we already have? So oftentimes we'll say to them, hey, we're going to redirect your question to a different answer, right? Or answering a similar question that gets you ultimately to the same path down the same road to success. The other thing that we do is we have monthly what we call prioritization meetings with our business unit leaders, where we prioritize the big asks that are coming in. So these are new processes, new technologies, upgrades to existing technologies, and we make the business make the decision on what's most important for them. Once we have that decision on what's most important for them, it's easier to say no to the other things, because we can go back to them and say, hey, look, we have this monthly meeting. You listed out the priorities with us. Now, here are these new priorities. Are they more important than the old ones? Or can they wait until the next prioritization meeting? Or can they wait till that previous priority is complete? And then it becomes a resource question, right? How much can we do with the resources that we have? So, a lot of times it's not saying no, it's redirecting. And it's not saying no, it's, hey, here are the other priorities. Can we do this one later? Is this one not maybe as important as the previous one?
Yeah, no, I like that. And like, it's like, it kind of almost reminds me of sales enablement. Like sales is going to come with requests in marketing, or they're always going to raise their hand, but is there something that already feeds that? And it touches on, I think it's the third stage in the framework that we built out, is like this data activation. And part of data activation isn't just giving people data, but it's enabling them to understand, how do you use it? Where should you use it? Yes, just an ad hoc spreadsheet pull is good enough. It doesn't have to be this beautiful dashboard. Obviously, ideally stuff is in a dashboard that's repeatable, but sometimes a flat, like data just sent in an email or Excel is good enough, and that's okay. Or maybe there's something that already exists. Lori, so you kind of talked about, each of you talked about this, but you really talked about different releases, like timeline for I guess more of a major data project, data journey project. Like like lots of factors will impact this. You talk about different releases, crawl, walk, run. How do you kind of take those into consideration? What's kind of the right pace for you in terms of those releases to show the wins, and then what's realistic for the people on the line of how long something like this will take?
Yeah, so that's a lot of question there, Sam. So yeah, for the most recent data strategy that we're doing with Genpact, because we started all the way back at the very back with contact data, and we knew we wanted to go all the way out through AI and automating the customer journey, that's a long path. So we knew there was a lot of foundational elements that needed to be reworked. We had to do the whole, we did everything over, from lead scoring, the lead lifecycle, lead management, like all of those processes, in addition to setting up the entire infrastructure to enable reporting. So for us, we knew it was a multi-year project. We knew that it was not going to be something that was super quick to be finished. And but I think we spent the majority of the time in the first foundational stage just on setting the strategy. So understanding what was the end goal and how we wanted to get there. And we did take a look at, what resources were going to be required. When you think about the things that are going to play into your success with a data strategy, there's resources. So your resources available to help you plan, design, build, launch, and the implementation piece of it, the ongoing maintenance and running of it, the analyzing of the data once the data is even available. All of those are considerations that you need to think that through before you even begin the first step, essentially. And then you've got I think, Justin, you were referencing people wanting to bring new technologies in because there's so many new technologies. You're like, oh my God, it's so exciting. So Teresa, you're interested in the data and geeking out on that. I geek out on all the new technologies. So you look at all the technologies that have come into the marketing stack over the course of years. When we looked at it, we were like, ooh, a lot of stuff and none of it's talking to each other. And how do we pull that together so that we actually have a complete picture? So those are the things that I think can really trip you up if you don't think them through in the long run. And also really just thinking through, truly, what are you trying to answer? I mean, some of the fundamental questions years ago I had, click data is great, but what does it mean? Because they can click 5,000 times. And then you look at the web journey and guess what? It's 100% bounce. So you've not done anything that you thought you've done. So, pulling all of that data into one continuous journey, those are the things that need to be thought out, like really thought out in the inception point. And then for us, I think the other piece that would impede your ability to really move forward is alignment. And Justin, you were talking about the releases and everybody being in agreement on prioritization. We went through it and said, okay, we've got executive alignment. We know that our CMO, our chief growth officer, our sales organization, our growth organization, our marketing and IT, we're on the same page. We know exactly what we want to do directionally with our data journey, and we agreed what that journey would look like. So we had a shared vision and a shared set of scorecard objectives against that plan. So it enabled us to get through the roadmap. So, I think original part of your question on there was, how long does it take? It depends on where your journey is, where you're starting in the journey, and how well you're going to organize and plan for it. I think that Teresa, you've said multiple times now that it is important to do the planning up front because that's where you gain your speed.
I've been known to ask all the questions at once too, so you got
that question.
Let me narrow it for you, Teresa. How do you set expectations about the time it's going to take?
So there's a couple of ways we do it, and I think it's also how the organizations are set up, right? So I'll give an example more to how my organization is set up, right? So we've clearly carved out 3 pillars. There are 5 pillars, but the 3 pillars I'll touch upon for this is really the technology pillar, the data pillar, and then the analytics and the measurement pillar, right? So what happens in our case is my leaders actually run both my analytics pillar, actually all 3 of these pillars are run through the agile framework, right? So it's really around this whole concept of sprints and releases. So what happens is we typically have 2-week sprint cycles. So it could be 2-week sprint in planning, which really means that my analytics strategist is talking to the business and really understanding what is the need that you have for either this data. So when they talk to the data, they talk about the data and the KPI. They're also talking about what technology is generating this data. Where is this data being processed? What's the KPI? And that then translates as a capability discussion for my data strategy and my technology team. Because, you might look at something like, hey, Adobe Analytics has 900 fields and, I'm only getting 400, but there's one field that I'm missing and that's going to make or break my engine. So let's figure this out, right? So typically all these 3 teams of mine really run on that agile sprint 2-week basis. So we'll have a 2-week for planning, a 2-week for data strategy to build out what is the outcome that they look for, then a validation. So we actually do that. And then we also set up environments where we look at what's staging or development versus what's production. So we really define what is production ready versus what's still in staging and development. So if you think about it, that's really how this comes together for us. And at that point, it's also very easy for our stakeholders because it sets up the timeline expectation with them on where we are and what are we going to release. And we maintain this in, I mean, everybody has different project tools that they have. We actually maintain this whole overview and product plan because it's easy for everybody to go back and forth and look at it. And then we have something we call as the dashboards that actually give every user or the stakeholder a point of view of where we are on the milestone and what's going to be delivered. So you see all of that. So it's typically we do use a more of an IT mindset when it comes to doing projects of this scale.
I see you both nodding, Justin and Lori as well. I know, Justin, you've done, I think you've had presentations on some of how you do this as well. So it's definitely the kind of IT dev approach, whether it's Agile or Jira or however you do it. So that's kind of best practice, and that gives the visibility. Let's move to start going to the magic questions that or at least Lori gets excited about. Where do technologies come into play here? Like, when do you start thinking about the right techs? Justin, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, I definitely geek out about the technology too. My team manages about 70 different marketing technologies, and it's every day I'm hearing about something new that one of my marketers wants to bring in-house. So, the first thing is, I forget who said earlier, but the strategy has to come before the technology. So we oftentimes get a marketer goes to a conference and sees this booth, and they're like, oh, shiny object, there's this great technology, we need it right now. And the first thing my team asks is, well, what problem are you trying to solve? Like, what are you trying to do? Why do you need this? And oftentimes they can't answer that question. And as soon as we see them hesitate and can't answer the question of why do you need it and what goal does it align with, we know that it's something that we don't need right this second, and B, may never need. But that doesn't stop the fact that we always kind of are thoughtful and we do a brief evaluation of pretty much any technology that somebody thinks is valuable. But the first thing, like I said, is strategy. And from the strategy, we're trying to identify use cases and requirements for this. And then the third thing is making sure that it aligns with the goals of all of our businesses. We don't like to bring in a new technology that solves like one particular use case for one particular business. We're trying to bring in technology that can really do something for everyone. Otherwise, our costs are going to be 3x, which you obviously, in today's world, you can't be spending 3x on non-revenue generating groups. So once the requirements are clear, as I said before, we make sure that we don't already have something in place that could accomplish 60, 70, 90% of the goal. If we have something in place that can achieve 80% or more of the goal, we pretty much discard the other technology and we move to the one that we already have in-house. The other thing that I think is interesting is people always say, well, are you going to buy versus build? Well, the question isn't always buy versus build. Sometimes the question is, are you going to use what you already have in a different or unique way? Which is kind of like buying and building, right? You've already bought it, and now you're kind of building on top of it. So when we think about technology, we're thinking about all the different ways that we can use the technology, not the particular use case that a single person brought into the organization for that technology. So that's the way we think about technology, and we think technology and data are hand in hand, right? Like, if the technology isn't helping you do something with your data, or the data isn't helping you do something better in the technology, then chances are that technology is probably not as valuable as you think it is.
Oh, and at some point, probably not on this webinar, I need to kind of ask the question, how do you determine what goes first in your titles, technology or operations? Since I think all three of you have that in your titles. So how do you choose that? Anyways, let's maybe save that one for over a beer. Teresa, what about what's in your tech stack around this data strategy? Like, what are the key, we talk about foundational, like what are those foundational technologies within this data strategy?
So a couple of things, right? So Justin, I actually wish I had your problem where it was only 70 technologies. and I would be glad with it. But I'm talking about a huge stack. So I'm not going to name a number because it's scary enough for me to actually look at it, but it just scares. But I think from a data foundation point of view, there's a couple of things, right? We actually have our enterprise data layer, which is owned by our enterprise data team. And today, just like every other company, it's a cloud solution, right? So we are on an AWS stack from that perspective. But on top of that, what we've actually created is really what we call the marketing data hub, right? Which is technically where, a lot of our execution data in marketing is really sort of the flavor of the month kind of data sets, right? So you might today want to invest in LinkedIn, and then tomorrow you're like, you know what, I'm not getting the right ROI. I'm going to do AdWords. I'm going to move away from this. I'm going to be more on Twitter or Facebook, whatever you want, whatever is the flavor of the month. So, and then we also go and procure data around intent. Every data vendor wants to sell us everything from intent to predictive scoring to optimizing everything, right? So our data hub is actually structured around a Snowflake architecture. And then obviously it connects to a lot more of other technologies from a ETL, data quality, and an ingestion point of view. But the core for us is this, the whole enterprise data warehouse and our marketing data hub. That's the two big pieces of the puzzle that we're invested in right now.
Great. And Laurie, what about you?
Yeah, so I don't have as many, thankfully, pieces of technology to manage. We did have a bunch of disparate tools in the ecosystem. For us, I think last year, the most transformational piece of the data unlock for us was when we brought in our data visualization tool, because it connected everything. So we now have the Google Analytics and the LinkedIn data and the AdWords and every other piece of the digital ecosystem coming into one tool, where we also have our full MDM in there. We also have all of our inflows, so we can see the shape of the data, the raw contacts versus the engaged contacts at a campaign level, at an account level, etc. So that was probably the most transformational piece of the data stack implementation thus far, and now we're marrying that in with the performance measurement and then as well the intent data. So we've got some levels of intent data technologies in the stack. We're going a lot harder on that. We're at the beginning point of that roadmap now, so that'll carry us all through next year, the never-ending roadmap. So I think for us, it was truly the data visualization tool was just that aha moment where everything came together real time, just eliminated hours and hours and hours of manual reporting.
Great. And Justin, how about you? Foundational elements as part of kind of your tech stack, particularly around this data strategy.
Yeah, so AWS is a key component for us, not just from kind of the data sort of layer, data lake layer, but also for our processes and our ETL is a lot of that is done within AWS. We're on a Google stack for search and display, so that's very helpful with SA360 and Campaign Manager. And then for visualization, reporting, Tableau and Good Data are really kind of the visualization and dashboarding tools that we use. Those are kind of, when I say foundational, it's like, where does the data kind of live? And then how do we kind of report and analyze on it? There's lots of things like from an activation perspective, but I don't consider those as foundational. We also, Segment is really important for us. I don't know if you guys use Segment or not, but from a, streaming product usage data is foundational for us, so we can see all of the things that our customers are doing within the product. And then Mixpanel and Amplitude, again, for reporting and creating segmentation. So I think those are really important. We have a really robust data cleanse and append process in Marketo and Salesforce, which I would call foundational. It makes it a lot easier for our marketers to have, maybe not clean data, but better data, right? Anybody that says their data is clean is is trying to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. Nobody's data is clean. You know, we're just all trying to get as much dirt off of our hands as possible. So I'd say those are kind of the foundational elements from my perspective. I'm sure I missed 7 or 12 others.
No such thing as perfectly clean data. Good luck.
No.
So I think we have time for one more. Let's go with the gotcha instead of the must-have. So Justin, actually roll it back with you. So I'll ask each one of you this, but one key gotcha that you've learned throughout your own data journeys that you can share with the audience, like what to watch out for.
Yeah, watch out for vendors that will overpromise and underdeliver. So I won't put Sam or Allocadia in that bucket, but there are a lot of vendors out there that, you know, will promise you the world, whether it's clean data or solving all your data problems or your reporting problems, or, you know, they'll build you the perfect predictive model, you know, in 24 hours. I think, you know, any vendor that tries to sell you the world is probably not telling you the truth. So, you know, I think one of the gotchas or one of the things that I would say to look out for is look out for vendors that are overpromising. Find vendors that are promising that they can do something small really well, and they are honest with you about what they can't do. And I think those are the ones, if they're honest with you about what they can't do, chances are what they can do is actually pretty impressive and will help you. So think about that. Make sure that you really dig into what vendors are trying to tell you, because they're, you know, oftentimes the sales rep is just trying to make their number, and they honestly don't care about your success. So find vendors that are interested in your success.
I was going to ask you for like, how do you tell? And I think that's a perfect one. It's like that almost self-awareness of what they do and don't do. I like that as a takeaway. If they can be like, no, I actually don't do that, or identify, like, it's kind of that like vendor EQ or something.
Yeah. And if, you know, if they say, oh, we do that, we do that, we do this, and, you know, they say we do everything that our competitors do. Well, you know, chances are that's not the case. So look for the people that are genuine and really can do something small really well, rather than the people that promise to do everything really well.
Well, Teresa, how about you?
So I won't comment on the vendors because Justin actually summed it up very well. That's probably my first question to every vendor is, tell me what differentiates you, right? What is it about you that I should be paying attention to? But having said that, I'll focus something more on internal, right? So, and I think we mentioned it in the paper also. One of the things that most data people and data geeks actually tend to do just by default is we want to get the perfect data, and we want to get all the data in, and we want it in a, you know, the highly cleansed manner it can be. I think one of the having faced those issues before in my early career, now I give a guidance to people who ask me about data, right? There is, if your expectation if data is going to be perfect is probably not going to hold water, right? You should not let, from a data point of view, you probably will have to make some calls around where good is better than perfect, and good is probably more than enough to what you really need to do. And that is probably the toughest thing you will actually do when you actually think about data strategy. It is really thinking through, at some point, while my ambition is perfection, I might actually get to good, and probably good is where I need to be, because perfection has a ton of ambiguity, which is not going to add value. I think that is the one important lesson that I've learned in my early career when digging into data, was just being careful about not boiling the ocean when it comes to data.
Like that one. So make the vendors, find vendor EQ, don't boil the ocean. What do you got for me, Laurie?
Yeah, those are absolutely spot on. I think then the remaining one for me is just don't take your eye off the ball. So you got your data strategy, you put so much effort into defining it and implementing it. Don't take your eye off the ball. It's not done. It's never done. And you have to have a continued set of eyes on it to make sure that it's running, it's being managed the right way, that whatever processes you put in place are being adhered to. And as well as you're adapting as new technologies are coming in, as new data requirements come up, that you are also adapting that in your initial data strategies, and you're evolving that and retraining and continuing that iterative process with it. It's just never done, I think, is for me, is one of the biggest learnings. You think it's done and you think you could turn back for 5 minutes and boom, something blows up because you did take your eye off the ball for those 5 minutes.
I really like that one. It's a good one to close on, because it's like you put, as you said, you put so much time and effort into this, and you don't want to regress. Like and that's not the fun part. The fun part is building. But like once it's in place, that's where the gains are. Building doesn't actually help you drive revenue, make better decisions, whatever. It's when you've got it in place. And so that maintenance, it's like maybe not the fun part or the what would get you up on stage always, but it's what drives revenue for the business. Great. So we're going to close up here. I want to thank all three of you for your time. This was really fun. I think I've got 4 pages of notes here. You wouldn't be able to read it if I put it up there because it's kind of chicken scratch, but I definitely really enjoyed this. Just to close out for everyone attending, make sure to download that ebook. It'll come out in a if you haven't got it by email, we'll follow up with it. It's around this marketer's data journey. That's insights from all 3 of these folks, plus another like 9 or 10 people. And if it's a topic you're interested in learning more about, or even how Allocadia software can help you, reach out to me directly. I'm sam.melnick@allocadia.com, and then we'll send you more information, some other great content that we provide. So Lori, Teresa, Justin, thank you so much. And everyone listening, have an awesome day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.